Some actors played tough. These men were tough, on screen and off. They weren't just following scripts, they were drawing from real scars, real fights, and real battles. Behind the cameras, they faced wars, prison cells, street brawls, and near-death stunts. They didn't need to act because life had already hardened them. In this video, we're counting down the 10 toughest actors in Hollywood history. Not just the most famous, but the ones who actually lived what they portrayed. But first, drop a comment and tell us, which actor from classic Hollywood would you never want to get into a real fight with? Because by the end of this video, that answer might change. Some had medals. Others had mugshots. But all of them had something real behind their stare. Let's start with a man whose calm demeanor was backed by battlefield grit. Number 10, Lee Marvin. He didn't growl, he didn't boast, he didn't have to. Lee Marvin carried a quiet, dangerous energy that made even other actors step back. It wasn't performance, it was presence. Before Hollywood ever rolled the cameras, Marvin had seen real blood, real bullets, and real war. As a Marine in World War II, he fought in the brutal Pacific Theater and was severely wounded in the Battle of Saipan. He took machine gun fire to the back, damaging his sciatic nerve, an injury that left him with a limp for the rest of his life. But he hid it on screen like it was nothing. That's just the kind of man he was. While most actors studied how to act tough, Marvin didn't need to learn. He'd already survived some of the worst combat on Earth, and when he played killers, gangsters, or cold-blooded veterans, there was something unsettlingly real about it. Directors said he moved like a man who had actually seen people die. Because he had. His understanding of violence wasn't dramatic. It was efficient, ugly, and fast. That realism made his performances unforgettable. He wasn't acting like a man who could kill. He was one. Off camera, his legend kept growing. During one film shoot in Oregon, Marvin got into a full-blown bar fight with a group of young lumberjacks. Witnesses say he held his own against multiple men, and then showed up the next morning on set like nothing happened, still bruised, refusing any delay in filming. Even his co-stars admitted there was something intimidating about him, not because he was loud, but because he wasn't. It was the kind of quiet you don't challenge. Lee Marvin wasn't pretending. He brought real combat experience to every scene, carried real scars under his costume, and showed audiences what actual toughness looked like, without ever needing to raise his voice. Number 9, Anthony Quinn. Before he ever stood in front of a camera, Anthony Quinn had already lived the kind of life most action heroes only pretended to. Born during the chaos of the Mexican Revolution, his earliest memories weren't of childhood games. They were of fleeing gunfire and watching soldiers storm through the streets. After his family escaped to the United States, life didn't get easier. Quinn grew up in the slums of East Los Angeles, where survival wasn't guaranteed and toughness wasn't optional. He was working jobs by the age of 9, butcher's assistant, laborer, construction hand, building a body and mindset forged through real hardship, not gym routines or movie sets. And when he needed money fast, Quinn did what few actors on this list can claim. He turned to professional boxing. Underneath that trademark broken nose was a young fighter who had traded blows in real rings for real stakes. No stuntman, no rehearsal, just gloves and grit. That raw physical power never left him. On the set of Zorba the Greek, Quinn carried massive logs across the beach that normally took 2 men to lift. Not as a show, but because the crew needed it done. During the filming of The Guns of Navarone, he insisted on doing his own cliff-climbing stunts at age 46, ignoring the protests of insurance teams and directors. But what truly made Anthony Quinn unique among tough guy actors was his comfort with both strength and vulnerability. He didn't need to puff his chest or hide behind macho swagger. He could cry on screen, express emotion, show depth, and still make you believe that he could crush a man if he needed to. His co-stars knew it. So did his directors. And deep down, so did every audience member watching him light up the screen with nothing but raw, lived-in authenticity. Anthony Quinn didn't need to act tough. He just was. Number 8. Charlton Heston. To most people, Charlton Heston was the face of epic Hollywood. Moses parting the Red Sea, Ben-Hur tearing across a chariot track. But behind those larger-than-life roles was a man with real-world toughness that made his on-screen power feel absolutely authentic. Heston's strength wasn't just visual, it was physical, disciplined, and often pushed to the edge. Before Hollywood recognized his commanding presence, he served as a radio operator and aerial gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II. Though his service didn't place him on frontline battlefields, it exposed him to military rigor, structure, and discipline that he carried into everything he did. What separated Heston from other Hollywood heavyweights wasn't just his build or presence, it was his absolute refusal to be coddled. He performed his own stunts, not because he needed to prove something, but because he believed in total immersion. During the filming of the 10 Commandments, he hoisted heavy stone tablets over and over for multiple takes, each one brutal on his arms and back, without complaint. And it didn't stop when he aged. While filming the greatest story ever told, he tore shoulder ligaments during a stunt. Most actors would have halted production. Heston. He had it wrapped at lunch and went right back to filming that same afternoon. Then came the infamous Conqueror shoot, a film set in Utah, dangerously close to a nuclear testing site. Out of the 220 cast and crew, nearly half developed cancer in the years that followed, including Heston himself. Yet even after diagnosis and surgery, he returned to acting with the same intensity. He had ribs removed, a lung taken out, and still showed up to work doing physical roles that would exhaust younger, healthier men. What drove him wasn't ego, it was duty. Whether playing biblical prophets or war generals, Heston brought real conviction, real endurance, and real pain tolerance to every frame. He didn't just act like a pillar of strength. He was one, built from military service, raw physical power, and an almost defiant willingness to suffer for the story. Number 7. James Kagny. At just 5 feet 5 inches, James Kagny didn't look like a guy who could take over a room until he did. He didn't need to tower over anyone. He just moved like someone you didn't want to mess with. Kagny grew up in the gritty streets of Manhattan's Lower East Side, a place where fists settled disputes and survival meant learning how to fight early. He didn't box for fun. He boxed for self-defense. Street fights weren't occasional, they were daily life. And by the time he made it into show business, Kagny already had the instincts of a brawler burned into him. That background made his tough guy performances legendary. Audiences believed him when he played mobsters and psychos because his punches looked real. His movements were sharp, explosive, and dangerous, not the slow, staged choreography of most actors. Director Raoul Walsh once said, "Jimmy knew how to throw a punch better than any actor I ever worked with, because he'd thrown plenty of real ones in his day." And it showed. But here's the twist. Kagny was also an accomplished dancer. He had unbelievable coordination and footwork, which he used both on stage and in the streets. It was that unique mix, fighter's aggression and dancer's precision, that made him such a dominating presence in every fight scene. It wasn't just acting. He was calculating every move with a trained fighter's eye. Off camera, he had a reputation too. Not loud, not flashy. But if you tried to push him, you'd find yourself on the ground. Bob Hope once said, "Kagny was the kind of guy who'd drop you, then help you up and buy you a drink." Even late into his career, he kept that toughness. He was old school, built from grit, timing and lightning-fast reflexes that didn't fade with age. James Kagny didn't need to be big to be feared. He was proof that toughness isn't about size, it's about mindset. Number 6. Steve McQueen. He wasn't just Hollywood's king of cool, he was the real deal. Steve McQueen didn't need to act rebellious, because he was. His toughness wasn't manufactured in a studio or borrowed from a script. It was carved out of a broken childhood, a stint in the Marines, and a life packed with real danger. Abandoned by both parents and raised in reform schools, McQueen ran away at 14 and drifted into trouble before enlisting in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was demoted 7 times and once spent 41 days in the brig, not because he was weak, but because he refused to back down to authority. But he wasn't just reckless. When it counted, he stepped up. During a training exercise in the Arctic, McQueen saved the lives of 5 fellow Marines by pulling them out of a sinking tank. That moment of bravery hinted at who he really was. Wild, unpredictable, but solid when it mattered. And once he hit Hollywood, McQueen didn't leave danger behind. He chased it. He performed nearly all his own stunts, against the wishes of every producer and insurance policy. In The Great Escape, the only stunt he didn't perform was the fence jump, and that's only because the studio forbade it. On the sand pebbles, he almost drowned doing a river scene. On the towering inferno, he insisted on doing fire stunts so dangerous that even seasoned professionals backed off. Off-set, his love for speed wasn't for publicity, it was obsession. McQueen raced motorcycles and cars professionally, sometimes under fake names to avoid getting kicked off films. He didn't just compete, he won. In the grueling 1970 Sebring race, he placed 2nd overall, with a cast on his foot. And when he learned his name was on Charles Manson's kill list, he didn't hire security. He just started carrying a loaded Magnum everywhere he went. McQueen's stunt double, who rarely had anything to do, once said, "Steve didn't act like a racer or a fighter. He was better than most real ones I knew." Steve McQueen wasn't acting fearless. He was fearless, and he lived fast until the very end. Number 5, Charles Bronson. He didn't talk much, and he didn't have to. Charles Bronson's silence was the warning, the kind of man who looked like he'd survived something you didn't want to know about, because he had. Bronson was born into brutal poverty as one of 15 children in a Pennsylvania coal mining family. By age 10, he was already working in the mines, covered in soot, breaking his back hundreds of feet underground. That coal dust, that suffocating darkness, it didn't just shape his body, it carved his soul. His childhood was violent, hard, and unforgiving, and so was his screen presence. There was nothing artificial about the weathered face, the narrowed eyes, or that bone-deep grimace. He wasn't a man playing tough. He was a man who had to be. During World War II, Bronson served as a B-29 tail gunner in the Army Air Forces, flying dangerous bombing missions over Japan. He was wounded in combat and earned a Purple Heart, then came home and took any job he could get: short-order cook, onion picker, and even part-time boxer. By the time he made it to Hollywood, he didn't care about fame. He just wanted to work. Directors quickly realized this guy wasn't a performer. He was real. His punches didn't look choreographed. They looked efficient, like a man who knew where to hit and how hard to end it fast. Co-stars talked about his grip, like being caught in a vice. Jan Michael Vincent, who worked with him on The Mechanic, said, "He just grabbed my shirt in a scene, and I couldn't believe the strength. He wasn't pretending." And when the Mafia allegedly sent him death threats after Death Wish, the studio offered him bodyguards. Bronson laughed it off. "I've lived too long," he said. "I've seen too much to be scared of that." Directors loved him because he didn't waste time. He showed up, hit his marks, delivered his lines like steel, and left. No ego. No games. just a lifetime of real toughness that came through with every stare, every word, every punch. Bronson didn't wear a costume. He was the role, every role. And you felt it. Number 4, Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum didn't try to look tough. He didn't have to. That sleepy-eyed stare, that quiet voice, that slouching swagger, it wasn't an act. It was a warning. Long before he became a Hollywood icon, Mitchum was riding freight trains across Depression-era America as a teenage drifter. He wasn't looking for adventure. He was just trying to survive. He worked brutal jobs, ditch digging, coal mining, and anything that kept him fed. And when things got desperate, he stepped into the boxing ring, under a fake name, just to make a few bucks. He got hit. He hit back harder. That scarred face, that broken nose, all real, not studio makeup. And the prison time? That was real too. As a teen, Mitchum was arrested for vagrancy and served time on a Georgia chain gang. That experience, sunburned skin, back-breaking labor, and guards with clubs never left him. It burned into his screen presence like a permanent shadow. By the time he hit Hollywood, he brought something that no acting coach could teach: a complete lack of fear. When he was busted again, this time for marijuana in 1948, it could have ended his career. Instead, Mitchum shrugged, did his 60 days in jail, and came out more popular than ever. He never apologized, never begged. He just went right back to work. On screen, he looked like a man who didn't give a DMN, because off screen, he didn't. But that didn't mean he was lazy. He was just honest about the job. When asked about acting, Mitchum famously said, "I have 2 styles, with and without a horse." Translation: he didn't fake it. He was it. Co-stars said there was something unsettling about him, not because he was loud, but because he wasn't. He had the calm of a man who'd been in real fights and didn't flinch when things got dark. Director Edward Dmytryk once said, "You didn't direct Mitchum, you just kept the camera rolling and hoped he didn't knock someone out." Robert Mitchum didn't shout, didn't strut, didn't pose. He just stood there, and you felt it. Number 3, Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas didn't get handed anything. He fought for every inch, in life, in Hollywood, and in the trenches of war. Born to poor immigrant parents, Douglas grew up in a house so destitute they sometimes couldn't afford food. He worked odd jobs from childhood just to help keep the lights on. But poverty didn't break him. It forged him. He clawed his way into college on a wrestling scholarship, real, competitive wrestling, not the theatrical kind. That's where he learned how to take a hit, and more importantly, how to never stay down. When World War II broke out, Douglas enlisted in the Navy, serving aboard a dangerous submarine chaser. Life on those small vessels was relentless. Tight quarters, constant tension, and the looming threat of enemy torpedoes. He was injured in service and medically discharged in 1944. But he never used it for sympathy. He just moved forward, stronger. His path to stardom wasn't through luck or charm. It was raw force of will. He had the look of a leading man, but the fight of someone who'd lived too many battles to ever take anything for granted. On screen, he didn't just perform scenes, he attacked them. His fight choreography in Spartacus wasn't acting, it was instinct. He trained with real fighters, refused stunt doubles, and took brutal hits just to make the violence feel authentic. And when a dangerous fall during filming caused a serious injury, he was back on set 2 days later. But perhaps the greatest proof of his toughness came off-screen, years later. In the 1990s, Douglas survived a devastating helicopter crash that killed 2 others. Most men in their 70s would have been finished. Not him. He endured painful rehab and walked again. Then, not long after, he suffered a major stroke that left him unable to speak. He could have faded quietly. Instead, he fought through years of therapy, regained his voice, and wrote a book about his recovery. His life was proof that toughness isn't about how loud you are, it's about how many times you get back up. Director Stanley Kubrick once said, "When Kirk decided something was going to happen, it happened. He was a force of nature." And that's exactly what made him one of the toughest actors to ever step in front of a camera. Number 2. Audi Murphy. If toughness had a face, it wouldn't be rugged or intimidating. It would look like Audi Murphy, young, boyish, unassuming. And that's what made him so terrifying. Audi Murphy wasn't just tough. He was the most decorated combat soldier in U.S. history. Before he ever set foot on a film set, he had already survived hell. At just 19 years old, Murphy did the unthinkable. He single-handedly held off an entire company of German soldiers for over an hour, then led a counterattack while wounded and out of ammo. For that, he received the Medal of Honor. But that wasn't a one-time miracle. He earned 28 military decorations before his 21st birthday, including every single U.S. award for valor. He destroyed tanks, charged machine gun nests, took bullets, and kept fighting. Historians estimate he personally killed over 240 enemy soldiers, more than some entire battalions. And yet, when you saw him, he barely looked old enough to shave. Hollywood found him after he appeared on the cover of Life magazine. But when he walked into the studio for his first screen test, the guards didn't believe he was the Audi Murphy. He looked too gentle, too quiet, too small, and that's what made him lethal. The disconnect between appearance and ability. When he starred in To Hell and Back, the film based on his own life, producers had to tone down the truth. Audiences wouldn't believe what he'd actually done in war. It sounded made up. Behind the scenes, Murphy suffered deeply from PTSD. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He had flashbacks so violent, his wife once said, "It wasn't Audi anymore, it was someone I didn't recognize." But despite the trauma, he never lashed out publicly, never lost control, except once, when a businessman got in his face during a heated argument. According to witnesses, Murphy's reaction was so fast, so dangerous, that the man backed down instantly. Later, he said, "I realized in that moment he could kill me, and he wouldn't even flinch." Audi Murphy didn't want to play the hero. He preferred romantic comedies and westerns. But every time he stepped on screen, there was a presence, a stillness that said, "This man has seen things and survived them." He didn't act tough. He was the realest thing Hollywood ever had. Number 1. John Wayne. You knew this name was coming. John Wayne wasn't just a Hollywood icon. He was the embodiment of American toughness. But what most people don't know is that the legend of the Duke wasn't all studio myth. Much of it was real. Before he ever wore a cowboy hat on screen, Wayne was born into the rough, rural life of early 20th century America. He worked hard, played harder, and earned a football scholarship to USC, not because of privilege, but pure physical strength. In his early years in Hollywood, he wasn't acting. He was moving props, building sets, and doing the back-breaking labor no one else wanted to touch. When he finally got his big break, he brought more than presence. He brought pain tolerance. During the filming of The Alamo, Wayne performed a brutal horse stunt that cracked several of his ribs. Instead of shutting down production, he wrapped his torso, took painkillers, and kept going. No complaints, just grit. But the story doesn't stop there. In 1964, doctors removed a lung and 4 ribs after Wayne was diagnosed with cancer. Most people assumed that would be the end of his career. Months later, he was back in the saddle, performing stunts in The Sons of Katie Elder like nothing had happened. That wasn't just professional toughness, that was personal defiance. Even more haunting was his time filming The Conqueror. The movie was shot downwind of a nuclear test site in Utah. Out of 220 cast and crew, nearly half developed cancer, including Wayne. He later died of stomach cancer, and many believe the radiation exposure was to blame. But he never stopped working. He didn't whine, didn't sue, didn't slow down. Director Henry Hathaway once offered him a stunt double after his surgery. Wayne looked him dead in the eye and said, "Either I do my own stunts, or you get someone else." That's who he was. Even actors who disagreed with everything he stood for respected his physical grit. Kirk Douglas, who clashed with Wayne politically, once said, "Disagree with his views all you want, but don't question the man's toughness. I've seen him work through things that would send most men to the hospital." John Wayne didn't invent the tough guy role. He just defined it, in real life and on screen. So there you have it, 10 of the toughest actors in Hollywood history. Not just men who looked the part, but who lived it, who brought real scars, real strength, and real stories to the screen. Which one shocked you the most? Who do you think should have been number one? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. And if you think today's actors are tough, just wait until you see who really ran old Hollywood behind the scenes. Subscribe for more untold stories, and we'll see you in the next one.